foreign clients are always concerned that they may be coming a little bit too late, and that the market is getting too expensive, and that it's not sustainable for another year or another 5 years. But the reality is that the economy is in good shape, interest rates are low, inflation is low, the foreign exchange seems to be reasonably stable. The other asset classes that typically Vietnamese families look at, such as gold, land, the stock market, certainly the real estate component of the stock market hasn't been performing that well. So we're optimistic. Obviously, we're looking at the number of cranes. Behind me, I can count 36 cranes in District 2 at the moment. That's probably up from about 30 7 years ago. So yes, one's got to imagine that the amount of new supply, 50,000, 60,000 units, is up dramatically from a year ago, even 2 years ago, and definitely from 3 years ago. But when you look across to a market like Singapore, 8,000 units, Thailand, Bangkok, 65 to 80,000 units a year. So when you look at benchmarks, you know, I think we're in a good place. But the reality is, as long as interest rates stay low, as long as the developers are continually moving towards the affordable and the middle income housing, and not necessarily all piling into the high end and the luxury, then I think we're probably going to avoid a bubble in 2017. Well, 18.5 months ago, in the middle of the year before last, the rules regarding foreign ownership changed, allowing people that could get a visa to Vietnam to buy multiple units, up to 30% of a condo development. Many people living here, particularly Japanese and Koreans, made use of this change in the law, and because they were buying for their own use, because they felt there was a long-term occupational requirement near schools, near shopping centres, same reasons why people buy anywhere else in the world. Those people have probably already bought and are probably very happy that they're now moving into those finished apartment buildings. The other group are obviously people that are investors. They could be living, they could be working in Vietnam and being investors, looking at what 6.5%, 7.5% yield, or they could be foreigners from overseas that are looking at the market as an investor, because Vietnam is considerably cheaper than Hong Kong, Singapore, and KL, Manila, Bangkok, and Jakarta, and obviously Tokyo and Seoul and Taipei. So yes, we get inquiries from those 7 cities on a daily basis. Maybe not as many as a year and a half ago, but still a large percentage of the sales that CBRE does is to foreigners. I don't think that will dry up. What is happening though is that developers who for the last 2 years have been focusing on the high-end and the luxury sector are now beginning to drop down to the mid-end and affordable sector. So that may not be so attractive to foreigners, but obviously still in that range of high-end and luxury, there's still a good proportion of the market at the moment. So probably the numbers will stay the same in terms of sales per year. Well, we see it everywhere. We see young people are using their smartphones not just to play Pokemon Go, but obviously for more commercial and useful things. So shopping, communicating, and getting information, business information. So that's changed dramatically. You can now book a conference room online, you can book a flight online, you can check your bank account online, you can buy clothes, handbags. And the information that's coming from developers is way better quality than the SMSs that we used to get 2 or 3 years ago, or the spam email. The quality of the imagery, the ability to see what an apartment will look like, to fly through a building to see what the views will be. All this is useful. We're seeing it at the other end with co-working space, where people don't necessarily want to take a 5 or a 3 year lease on an office building, and they're much happier to use and to share work and to feed off each other in terms of ideas and finance and marketing skills as well. So we're seeing it from both ends. We're seeing it from the developer's point of view, we're seeing it from the occupier's point of view. We're seeing it from, but Vietnam is still a long way behind. If you look at the fintech idea of just catching a light in Vietnam, but you look across in Australia or the UK or the US, fintech, protech, retech is a long way ahead. And you're seeing now what used to be done by a big development company with 2, 3, 4, 500 staff now may be possible to do the same thing with just 20 staff. The project management skills, project management resources which can be now brought to bear using smart technology saves a huge amount of money. Same work that can be done in half the amount of time, and the accuracy is improving as well, and it can be moved around the world. So we're seeing outsourcing. BPO was synonymous with the Philippines. Now more and more that's being done here. So slowly, real estate is a sector is beginning to benefit from these disruptive technologies. And obviously the disruptor in chief, Mr. Trump, has just been inaugurated, and I'm sure the concept and the things that we held dear, such for the last 5 years, 8 years, TPP, all these things are being disrupted. So it's not just technology, it's ideas, resources, and 2017, I'm sure will be another year where we'll see equally interesting ideas come to the market and maybe take us by surprise. The door for international retailers really opened about 15 years ago, when some of the first Singaporean, Japanese, Korean, Malaysian retailers started to come to Vietnam and either distribute or license their products. These products were mainly made in the US or in Europe. Well accustomed both in Parkson, Metro, Big C, and in all the Vincom shopping centres, to seeing a large number of foreign retailers and ideas, and I don't think that's going to slow down. Obviously, there are times when we see a slowdown in the Singapore market, so some of these retailers are keen to come to Vietnam. We now read about big shopping centres, shopping malls in the US closing down every month. So the model in the US is changing away from shopping centres. Obviously the big thing in the last 5 years is online retailing and the ability to look at products on your smartphone before you buy them. So people will maybe go and look at the physical product but buy it online, or buy it online having seen the physical product in the shop. So the way that people buy, they get their information, they cross-check pricing, is being disrupted by technology. Developers are obviously very keen to have new-to-market shops and products and services in their building. So we've just seen this year, the last half of the year, Keppel opening the Saigon Centre Phase 2 with Takashimaya and about 80 or 90 line shops, and obviously they're very keen to bring in as many shops for the first time to Vietnam, so that their shopping mall looked different, felt different, and had a different feel to all the other shopping centres that are being built or have been built. So I'm optimistic that a lot of people are looking at the Vietnam story. It's not just investors, it's not just developers, but it's retailers, and probably for the first time in 5 years, new to market retailers. And so I think that we'll begin to see a lot of new stores coming to Vietnam for the first time in 2017, 2018, as some of these new shopping malls open, not just in Ho Chi Minh, but across Hanoi, Da Nang, Can Tho, and so we'll see these the quality, the the way they use the space, the range of services being offered will become more and more like what we're used to seeing in KL, Bangkok, Manila and Jakarta. Still some way to go to catch up Hong Kong and Singapore, but we're beginning to catch up some of those other markets now. Well, I think when times are good in Vietnam, they're good, and when they're bad, they're pretty awful. But at the moment we're sitting in a good place because other markets around Asia are finding it challenging, maybe for political reasons, maybe for economic reasons, maybe they've got issues regarding trade or commodities, and Vietnam is in enjoying its time in the limelight. It still remains a relatively cheap manufacturing location. Companies are still, as they reinvest in China, many of them are looking at their options for a manufacturing facility in Vietnam. What we're finding still is that the Koreans, the Japanese and the Taiwanese still see Vietnam as a very good alternative to China and a very good alternative to the Philippines, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, for many of the products that we're able to make here and put into the supply chain, either the regional supply chain or the global supply chain. So we're seeing further increases by Samsung, LG, but not just those Korean companies, but also Japanese companies, Taiwanese companies as well. That's a good sign, because we don't want it to be just a residential-led boom. We want it to be residential, industrial, and the third area where we're excited is hospitality. Vietnam is definitely on the radar screen for, as it has been for many Europeans, for a once-in-a-lifetime trip for young backpackers, for a once-in-a-lifetime post or pre-university trip, but also for mainland Chinese, for the 200 million tourists a year that come out of China, as well as obviously with the budget airlines connecting Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, Philippines, all the AirAsia visitors. But we've probably not seen the peak of the Russian tourists, and we're now beginning to see, as I mentioned, China, but also from Taiwan and Japan and Seoul. And now there's I think 3 or 4 places that Vietnam Airlines and Vietjet fly to in Japan, as well as 2 or 3 places that those airlines now fly to in Korea and in Taiwan. So we're seeing not just people coming in through Ho Chi Minh, but coming in through Da Nang and Haiphong, and maybe one day Canton, of course, Hong Kong. There's not a lot that developers can do about, and investors can do about pollution and traffic. Those are government issues and obviously social issues for all of us. But I suppose the way we'll see an impact is that with 150,000 new cars a year, with 7 to 8 million motorbikes in Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City, people are going to become very, very conscious about that journey to work, journey to the shopping centre, journey to see mum and dad, and journey to school in the morning. So people will maybe, instead of being comfortable to live in District 2 or District 9 or go about, will now try and choose to be closer to the school, closer to parents, closer to work. Whereas before it made a lot of sense to live in the cheaper areas where you could buy land cheaper. It's still going to be 3 years before the metro line in Ho Chi Minh, and probably 1.5 years, 2 years for Hanoi. So people will start to look very, very closely about how they can get out of the traffic, and obviously the only alternative at the moment is to choose somewhere to live closer to work. So we'll see the rise of District 4, the continued rise of District 4. I think that makes a lot of sense. And people will urge the government to start work on that. Developers will start urging the government, as well as end users, to start that 2nd, 3rd, 4th line in Ho Chi Minh and the 3rd and 4th lines in Hanoi. if you think back 15 years ago, I think there was 1 or 2 flights a week into somewhere like Da Nang. Foucault, 0, Dalat, 0, Haiphong, 0, Nachang, 0. Now that's completely changed. I think there's 15, 20 flights a day, international flights a day to Da Nang. So clearly anyone coming for a long weekend can now go straight to the destinations before they had to fly into Hanoi or Ho Chi Minh. And nobody wants to do that for a 3-4 day trip, which a lot of these trips are, just a few days. So really it's the opening up and the broadening of the international access to other cities that's really making a difference, particularly for Quark. As much as these locations are very much built for the local market, obviously they rely out of school holidays, out of weekends, they rely on foreigners. So to have a more balanced occupancy, people need foreigners. Also their price point in some cases for retirees could be higher, and obviously for backpackers could be lower. So we really need foreigners. We need those mainland Chinese, we need those Russian, we need Korean, Taiwanese and Japanese, as well as the richer retirees from Australia, Europe, the EU, and obviously the US. So for people that are coming just for a few days, those international airports and the capacity, the increased capacity in Nachang, particularly Da Nang and Haiphong, made a huge difference. I can't be sure, but I'm 99.9% sure that more buildings have traded in the last 12 months than probably traded in the last 12 years. By our CBRE records, I think we stopped counted about 11 buildings in Ho Chi Minh and probably 3 or 4 in Hanoi. Income-producing assets that were full of tenants being emptied out by new owners, new investors. We've seen that for the first time, haven't seen that before. We've seen buildings being acquired to be upgraded and refurbished, and we're seeing, we eventually saw the sale of the lottery site at the end of last year. We're seeing foreigner to foreigner, foreigner to local, local to foreigner, and local to local sales. So very, very exciting market. We're seeing buildings that had been bought 3 or 4 years ago being sold again. That's exciting. That's obviously the norm in Hong Kong or Singapore, but definitely was not the norm here. So we think that the M&A story will continue. We tend not to call it M&A, we tend to call it investment properties or capital markets, but whatever you want to call it, it's a great story, and it's a maturing of the market. My colleagues now in Singapore and Hong Kong actively ask me to find and source properties for investors, regional investors, typically from Asia, but occasionally from the US or from Europe. And long may it last.